Welcome to the next very short reading and even shorter reflection this week to accompany our communion service on the 16th, Wednesday the 16th of December. I hope this finds you well. So our reading for this morning is taken from Luke chapter 7, second half of verse 18 to verse 23. Calling two of his disciples, John sent them to the Lord to ask, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" When the men came to Jesus, they said, "John the Baptist sent us to ask you, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" At that very time, Jesus cured many who had diseases, illnesses, and evil spirits, and gave sight to many who were blind. So he replied to the messengers, "Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." On Sunday, the Church nationally reflected on one of the traditional Advent themes, which is about the life and work of John the Baptist, to consider how John features in the overall ministry of Jesus. And this reading carries on with that theme. While we are getting ready to celebrate Jesus' birth, our reading here considers Jesus and John's adult life some 30 years later. But the purpose of hearing this reading today is to encourage us to reflect on simply who the birth of the baby we are getting ready to celebrate will grow into. And we should be as surprised as John the Baptist as we consider that question. It would seem that John expected Jesus and what he would do to be somewhat different to what he had expected. Hence he sends some of his disciples to ask Jesus, "Are you the one who is to come? Are you going to be? Are you the Messiah or not? Should we expect someone else?" Jesus, in typical form, does not give a simple yes or no. Rather, he asks John's disciples to consider exactly what he is doing and to reflect on what that means. I get the idea that John expected Jesus to hold to the usual messianic expectation of that time. That was that in a moment, God's kingdom would be suddenly and majestically established. But it is clear from Jesus' slightly cryptic response that the coming of God's kingdom would be different to that expectation. And I think that is still the case today. Many people would simply love God to go and for everything to be okay. But as we know from our experience of today, of the pandemic today, we know that is simply not the case. So what does Jesus say? He says, "Go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor." That is Jesus himself doing that. We're not in that same position today. Oh, that we wish we were, that Jesus was very much here physically today to sort out the problems of the pandemic. Yet he is still here by giving hope through that story, and we see parts of the coming of the kingdom in a much more subtle way still today. You see, the coming of God's kingdom is more subtle than flashbang and everything is okay. Rather, Christmas is God standing in the beauty of the world and dealing with the brokenness that is experienced within the world. That is what the coming of the Messiah is about. So we are left with a question to ask ourselves as we prepare to celebrate Christmas 2020 with the pandemic raging as the context all around us. Who do we see Jesus as? Simply the romantic image of a baby that all who saw him just cooed at, and from whom we can just get a little bit of hope, and that's it today before we pack Christmas away? Or is it God becoming flesh amongst us, ready to enter both the beauty of the world but also the suffering of creation, and so offer deep hope for all who will openly respond to Jesus' call to know him? Sadly, however much we don't like the fact, suffering is very much part of the world around us. Very short reflection this week, yet the question to consider, who do you understand Jesus to be, is surely the most profound question that we can ever ask ourselves. Do we celebrate just the birth of a baby? Or do we celebrate the coming of God into creation with all the hope that that does bring with it? How you answer that question, what you do with that information as a result, is the most fundamental and can be the most life-affirming question you can offer, you can answer.